Nobody likes to associate with us.
I have lost my peace of mind.
My relatives think I disgrace the family. It prevents me from going out. I cannot participate in public functions. I am lonely. I always live in fear.
Stigma. It's a concept that captures the negative perceptions that are generated through social, cultural, and religious attitudes in a given community or wider society. Stigma is a label that is placed upon victims that changes the way society views them. This label can alienate a person, make them feel shunned, induce trauma, and create feelings of self-doubt. Stigma is also not exclusive to the victim survivor. It can have a domino effect and impact the family too, ultimately pushing the victim survivor into a vicious and tragic cycle of unending violence. But to understand stigma completely, we need to understand its causes. 25 years of armed conflict has left a debilitating mark upon Sri Lanka, with its effects being felt many layers below the visible surface. Conflict-related sexual violence is one such layer. Conflict-related sexual violence includes early or forced marriage, sexual exploitation, sexual bribery, rape, gang rape, sexual abuse, checkpoint harassment, trafficking, unwanted pregnancies, forced contraception, sexual torture, sexual harassment, and violence and harassment during military surveillance, and any other form of sexual violence that can be directly or indirectly associated with conflict.
At the time I was raped inside the tent, they were placed there for our protection.
In our culture, to measure a man's success, you have to be married before 30, have kids, a house, a vehicle, and a job. Now, if you're a victim of sexual violence, it's harder to achieve most of these things. Your life kind of stops there.
When people learned that I am going to have a fatherless child due to rape, everyone isolated me. I was chased away. I could not face the villagers. I went to the village only once in that condition. My own father tried to kill me and chased me away from home. Even my friends from the village repulsed me. I have not gone to the village since. When I found out I was pregnant, I had to leave the village and stay away from those I am in contact with. The principal of the school called me at night and asked me to visit his house to discuss the children's admission. I didn't think anything of it and went to meet him because I wanted the children to study. The principal approached me and wanted me to sleep with him. I wanted my husband back. I was persuaded to provide a sexual bribe to the officer. I became pregnant as a result, and this made the neighbors gossip and talk badly about me. Notices about my situation started to appear in the village. Both my siblings and the community have ostracized me. I aborted the baby 3 months into the pregnancy. My father married me off by force to an officer due to war-related troubles. I was 17 years old then.
Men, women, and children may be subjected to conflict-related sexual violence by those holding public office, individuals affiliated with state armed forces, individuals affiliated with non-state armed groups, family members, and other individuals in a position to abuse the powers granted to them during conflict, political instability, or in a climate of impunity.
My own husband sold me for money. He used to beat me when I objected to having to sleep with others. I have fallen from the frying pan to the fire. When I escaped the camp where I was raped, another officer abused me. Luckily, he retired. In addition, my sister's man tried to come to me at night.
For victim survivors of conflict-related violence, stigma has become an inevitable manifestation. Moreover, the government has yet to identify or directly address this problem in its national plans and policies. The stigma these victim survivors experience and its long-term impact on their lives leaves a scar that cannot be erased. Self-stigma. Stigma can be brought upon oneself by family members and by the community.
It has affected my free interaction. I don't generally function without fear. I don't easily interact with others. I doubt all of them. I approach everything with fear.
I felt isolated more and more. from people and from reality. I started to lie to people. Self-evaluation, anxiety and overthinking led me to depression.
Victim survivors speak of unbearable trauma, fear and guilt due to stigma. Most victim survivors remain silent about the incidents, as they fear the stigma and shame they would face if the incident is discussed publicly. Some of them fear for their security and safety as well, and thus prefer to remain silent.
I never looked for a remedy due to fear. There is no possibility of receiving justice for what happened. Even though I wanted to go before the law, I did not do so because of fear. I did not think of going before the law due to the fear of having guilt imposed on me as well. Even if this incident is not my fault, society keeps looking at it as if it is. Society speaks badly of those affected. That is our social structure and practice. It is for this reason that women who are affected don't openly share and speak of their experiences.
Family stigma.
Nobody came forward to help me. Everyone washed their hands of me, including my relatives. My relatives were scared of associating with me. This brought much pain to me.
My husband is an alcoholic. He's a good person, but he dealt with it by turning to alcohol. My children didn't like to go to school. They were sad because their peers would ridicule and make fun of him. There is a chance he's being bullied at school and other places. I heard that they say, your mother went with the army. So it could be a reason, right? So it affects the children as well.
Due to the stigma experienced by the victim survivor's relationships suffer and his or her ability to relate to and care for family members diminishes. Distinctive from this is the stigma that family members experience simply by virtue of being a family member of a victim survivor of sexual violence. Societal stigma.
We are ostracized even when we go to temple. When we go to a shop to buy something, even the shop owners try to exploit us. Even when we go to government institutions, we are made to engage in unnecessary conversations.
I was afraid of getting exposed to the community because of what happened to me. And being in a so-called traditional and overprotective community, it would have been hard to cope up, to live and face others without being judged.
I used to be a person who had good relationships with the people in the village. I don't go out now. I'm scared to go out carrying my own child. My future has been destroyed. Society says we are sinful, worthless women. No one talks of the men who committed crimes against us.
In our culture, victims are perceived as the sinners and treated as criminals.
Stigma is generated by social norms and biased perceptions, which are also influenced by religious beliefs as well as by cultural practices or community practices at large. Marginalized and ostracized victim survivors often perceive society negatively because it prevents them from rebuilding their lives. Access to services. Many survivors of sexual violence do not access any services when they have experienced violence. They do not want to face society, and they rarely receive any support from state services such as obtaining documentation, counseling, psychosocial support, and livelihood assistance due to stigma.
I don't like to go back to that area because I fear that the officers who raped me would identify me. Because of that, I have no way of going and getting my documentation of proof.
Access to justice. Seeking criminal justice is a public process and adds to their trauma. Stigma often prevents victim survivors from seeking justice because they are fearful and anxious of what they have experienced and how society may perceive them because of what happened to them. They have no confidence that the criminal justice system would provide an adequate remedy for the violence they have been subjected to.
The same officer who caught the perpetrator called me that night, knowing that I don't have a husband.
What can be done to address stigma? The government must address the crippling impact of stigma faced by conflict-related sexual violence survivors by designing anti-stigma interventions at every level. These measures include putting in place systems and processes in state institutions such as in the police stations, hospitals, courts, and in public offices to prevent stigma. Educational and police reforms that include prevention and addressing of stigma, sensitizing of the justice sector, and providing support to survivors of sexual violence are critical interventions needed to make a difference in the lives of conflict-related sexual violence victim survivors, so they are able to lead normal lives free of stigma.
We need a justifiable solution for the injustices we have experienced. The officers from government institutions who are expected to work with victims such as us should be given training.
We should be given an opportunity to be ordinary citizens in society.
Collectively as a nation, we need to address and combat stigma. Developing attitudes of understanding while being better informed are some preliminary steps we can take towards ending stigma borne by conflict-related sexual violence survivors. Role of society.
That's the thing society has to understand. That someone's bodies are being violated without their consent, and it's not the fault of the victims. It really has to start from the society. Without that mindset, whatever changes, policies and programs one brings will mean nothing.
Change cannot be brought in only by the laws, but groups of individuals coming together can bring this change. The perpetrators can only be punished if everyone from society stands together collectively and demands justice.